Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on Locrine and we get to hear from Strumbo today in Act 4, Scene 3. Now remember, Strumbo is one of the clowns and there was a little bit of interaction between clowns and nobles when Humber and all the Scythians came through and burned everything down, and Strumbo's first wife was killed when the village was burned. And Locrine and his crew promised that they would build him a new house, and they said, well, you better build it by the bar because I'm going to be drinking myself silly. And then Strumbo fought in some of the battles and he pretended to be dead to try to escape things, and that basically worked. And then he was talking to a woman named Marjorie and her husband and her father, and they were like, you better marry her, and she starts beating him with a stick until he agrees to marry her. And that's sort of the story of Strumbo so far, but there hasn't been a lot of mixing between Strumbo the clown and the nobles, but we get a little bit more of that here in Act 4, Scene 3, because if you remember the beginning of the scene, we saw Humber, who saw his son dead on the battlefield, encountered the ghost of Albonact, was all rearing to go to get revenge, and sort of went off on his own. But everybody else thinks that he's dead. They all think that the Scythians were wiped out. So his wife Estrald is now going to marry Locrine, which has made Corineus mad because Locrine was supposed to marry Gwendolen. But Estrald thinks that Humber is dead and thinks that Locrine killed him, so she's not super jazzed about getting married, but feels she has no other choice. But at the beginning of Act 4, Scene 3, we the audience, find out that Humber is not dead. He's been wandering around in the wilderness, and his hair's grown really long, and yesterday he gave us a very long monologue about how there was nothing to eat anywhere. He couldn't find roots, he couldn't find birds or fruit or beasts to kill or anything. I think the stage directions even say that he has like a dart or something, so he could go hunting, he just can't find anything to hunt, and he is desperately starving. So after his monologue, Strumbo comes in and says, "How do you, masters? How do you? How have you escaped hanging this long time? I'faith, I have escaped many a scouring this year, but I thank God I have passed them all with good coragio. And my wife and I are in great love and charity now. I thank my manhood and my strength, for I will tell you, masters, upon a certain day at night, I came home, to say the very truth, with my stomach full of wine, and ran up into the chamber where my wife soberly sat, rocking my little baby, leaning her back against the bed, singing lullaby. Now when she saw me come with my nose foremost, thinking that I had been drunk, as I was, indeed, snatched up a faggot stick in her hand and came furiously marching toward me with a big face as though she would have eaten me at a bit, thundering out these words unto me, Now, drunken knave, where hast thou been so long? I shall teach thee how to benight me another time. And so she began to play knave's trumps. Now, although I trembled, fearing she would set her 10 commandments in my face, ran within her, and taking her lustily by the middle, I carried her valiantly to the bed, and flinging her upon it, flung myself upon her, and there I delighted her so with the sport I made, that ever after she would call me sweet husband, and so banished brawling forever. And to see the goodwill of the wench, she bought with her portion a yard of land, and by that I am now become one of the richest men in our parish. Well, masters, what's o'clock? It is now breakfast time. You shall see what meat I have here for my breakfast. So this is a little bit interesting in that he's talking to masters. It feels like this is direct address of the audience, because I'm not sure who else he would be talking to. He's not talking to Humber at this point. He hasn't even seen Humber at this point. So I think that this would be a moment for Strumbo to talk to the audience directly, and basically he's just catching everybody up on what has happened since the last time we saw him. And it comes down to, he's had some rough times, but things are good with his wife now, and it all boils down to he came home drunk one night and she threatened to beat him, but he made love to her instead, and it was so good that they haven't fought since. So Strumbo is the best lover in the play, supposedly. But then also she took some of her money and bought a plot of land, so now he's a really rich man. which who would have thought that? And then he sits down to have some breakfast. And at the very end of his monologue, he uses the word meat, which was said about 7 times in Humber's monologue from yesterday. So you can imagine Humber in the same general area, and he hears somebody else say meat. He's going to come out and he's going to have a monologue tomorrow. So I will see you then for that. Mwah.